Hi, everybody. I'm Calvin, and I am an alcoholic. So, thank you to Tricia and Pastor G. It's an honor to be here. I also want to thank my wife. It's actually the first one of my open talks that she's come to listen to. So she gets to hear my side of my life. I just keep reminding her this is my version of what happened to me. So I was thinking before while we were eating, as I was looking around at some of the friends, family, really, that have come out here to support me. There's a few guys in this room that were in one of my first few meetings. And it's just a real honor to have both Tom and Mark here for that. One of my first sponsors is here also, Jim. Thank you for coming. It's amazing, this life that I have gotten as a result of Alcoholics Anonymous. There's just no other way to describe what I have other than I'm just grateful. So I'm going to tell you what it was like before I got here, briefly, as briefly as I can. I took my first real drink a couple of weeks before graduating from high school. First night I drank an entire case of beer, and I was not the drunkest one in the room. They actually asked if I could drive home because the one who'd had 2 beers couldn't hardly walk. I thought I had arrived at that point. Some of y'all get that. I never felt like I fit in, and when I put alcohol in my body, I felt like I belonged. It felt like the pieces fit right then. Learning after many years of that being just a lie. But that's how it felt at the time. I chased that feeling, that euphoria of that first drink for 10 years. I've always, the song Comfortably Numb by Pink Floyd, I always loved that song because that's what it felt like, that first drunk. And I could never get that again. I could never figure out where it was, that stopping point to where I felt good. Because I'd just go right past it, because if it felt all right here, I got to keep drinking more because it's going to feel better. I've learned that 1 is too many and 100 is not enough. So that's the gist of it. For why I drank like I did. What got me to Alcoholics Anonymous is I've gotten 2 drunk drivings. The second one, the state of Michigan thought it was a good idea for them to run my life for a year. Didn't like the way they wanted to do it. I voiced my opinion often in the meetings, and I was told, so what? I used a few profane names to address some people in the court system and the counseling system that I was being ordered to, and I was told that wasn't acceptable, that these people were in my life as a result of my decisions and my actions. So, I ended up in the court system. I didn't like it. I'm from Potterville. I ended up in a local meeting in Potterville that was walking distance from my house. And it was a Sunday night. And, Sunday night was a good time to be really, really just finishing off that numbness for the weekend. And I ended up getting to this meeting. One of the guys there, who ended up being my first sponsor, Butch, said that I needed more. That just going to that meeting wasn't enough. I ended up at the Saturday morning meeting at the East Club, which is where I met Tom, Mark, Kathy, and Alice. I think the 4 of you were actually in the first meeting I was at the East Club. That's been almost 25 years ago now. It's hard to believe that. I honestly don't think I'd have survived. Even if I'd have just stayed at some of the small town meetings, I don't think I'd have survived unless I got around people who took sobriety as seriously as they did. They wouldn't let me get away with my BS. That's the best way to put that. I wasn't allowed to float along anymore. They were firm and loving with me. So yeah, I didn't want what you guys had. I'll tell you that right now. There was nothing that looked attractive to Alcoholics Anonymous to me. The first thing I was sitting there talking to my first sponsor, I said, I don't want to be an alcoholic. I don't want to. This isn't okay. I don't want this. He goes, so? And that was his response, was just so. Anytime I made an objection to where I said I didn't want this or I didn't want to do that, his response was, so? So what? Doesn't mean just because you don't want it doesn't mean you don't have to. He very calmly started taking me, my first sponsor calmly started taking me to dignitary sympathy group meetings. And I needed guys that spoke louder than the voices in my head were talking. I hear by the nodding and all that, those voices that constantly tell me that I'm not enough, that tell me I'm going to screw up, that tell me you're going to drink again, so why bother? I needed people that would talk to me louder than those voices were. And they did. Usually with love. Before I started taking any steps, still objecting to this whole thing, I didn't want to do it. I went to Houghton Lake. So my last drink was on November 1st. And I went to Houghton Lake for Tip-Up Town, which is last weekend in January. I've been doing it for years, going up there with the same group of guys, getting hammered, riding snowmobiles. And these guys in this meeting on Tuesday night told me it's a lose-lose situation. If you go, it's a lose-lose. You go there and you drink, then what? You could die. You go there and you don't drink and you think you can play around with this and you don't have to take it seriously. He goes, you do that and you're going to end up dead. I still hadn't thought about this thing as being deadly. I hadn't come to accept the fatality of my disease yet. And still wasn't really serious about it. I went up there, loaded the snowmobile in the back of the truck. I went up there anyways. And when I pulled into my buddy's trailer, unloaded the snowmobile, went inside and told the guys, I said, I'm going to a meeting. I was so scared at this point that I was going to drink that the Houghton Lake Clubhouse was less than a mile away. So I jumped in the truck and went over there. And I stayed there until they closed. And I stood in the parking lot for an hour afterwards talking to one of the guys up there. Went back to my buddy's trailer, went into the bedroom and locked the door. At 6 a.m., I started that snowmobile up and loaded it in the back of the trailer, back of the truck by myself. And I was back in Lansing by 10 o'clock that morning. And I just missed the meeting at the East Club because I tried to get there and back for that because I was so scared at that point. That was the beginning of me actually accepting the fact that, okay, I am an alcoholic. So that's 4 months after my last drink before I started to believe that just maybe that I was an alcoholic. Still didn't believe I'm just going to go right through the how it works, because that's what works best for me, tell you what I did and how all that. Still didn't believe that my life was unmanageable. Okay? Think about that for a minute. My sponsor had to tell me, you think your life is so manageable that the state of Michigan thinks they have to manage your life for you for a year. How manageable is your life, really? At that point, I was one drink away from losing my family, probably losing my job. I worked for my parents. It was literally all just one drink away from losing everything, giving it all away. But I still thought I might be able to manage this. That is absolute insanity. We're looking back at it. And much to my objection, my sponsor pointed out to me that, yes, I am an alcoholic, and yes, your life is unmanageable. Now we're going to move on. So it's now what? Now what do I have to do after that? It's like, okay, maybe, just maybe I am an alcoholic, but now what? So it's the second step. I came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Didn't really have a lot of problem believing in God at that point. I was raised in a church by my grandma would take us to church. I'd go with her, once every couple of months or whatever. I had read the beginning of the Bible. I'd read Genesis and Revelation. And the pastor's got to get the biggest kick out of this one, because that's just like the worst way to read the Bible. Just honestly, that is the worst way to go at it. I had thought that I had screwed up so bad and pissed God off so much that God wouldn't restore me to sanity. That I was a lost cause in God's eyes. And I had to listen to the guys in my men's group tell me their stories. And my sponsor said, it's pretty arrogant to think that you're so much worse than the rest of us. That you think that God will restore us to sanity, but he won't restore you. And I had never thought about that as being arrogant. Still kind of struggled with that at times. So much to my objection at that point, second step was kind of settled. We moved on. The third step, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. That one was to me like I was afraid to be the hole in the donut. I told my sponsor, I said, I don't know what God's will is for me. I don't want to turn my life over to something that I don't know what is going to happen. Honestly, at least with alcohol, I kind of knew what was going to happen. I had enough of a track record of 10 years of drinking. I kind of knew what was going to happen when I started drinking. I didn't know what this God was going to ask of me. And, I said, I don't want to be the freak standing on the corner on a soapbox screaming, you must repent, the end is near. Because that's to me what I expected, thought God was going to want of me. Again, like Tom is doing right now, my sponsor laughed at me. He'd laugh. My sponsor laughed at me a lot in that first year. He just said, I think God's will for you is for you to don't drink and don't hurt anybody intentionally. Because if you can just stick to that, then you'll be okay for now. And I'm like, okay, I can do that. I can do that. So that puts us to the fourth step. And the fourth step made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. I didn't want to do this. I had no intention of doing this, didn't want to do it. I wanted nothing to do with this fourth step. And I remember sitting in the step meeting on Saturday morning, and after my sponsor and I had done the third step prayer in his basement, it was the next morning was the meeting at the East Club. And it was on the fourth step. And I'm like, I told everybody in the meeting, we just did a third step, so I'm on the fourth step, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and it was all lies. It was just all a bunch of BS lies. I had no intention of doing it. I didn't want to do it, and I avoided it. And I waited for 12 weeks till we came back around to that fourth step. And I didn't want to hear the guys in that room saying, well, how's that fourth step coming? They were already just kind of, hey, I hear you're writing that fourth step. How's that fourth step coming? I didn't want to come back around where we were going to talk about it in that meeting, and we have not done anything on it yet. Little of the stuff that's going on in my life at this point outside of AA was I was still avoiding you all. I remember going through Kroger over on the west side and seeing one of the guys from AA and ducking down a different row because I didn't think we were supposed to see each other outside of meetings. Y'all think it's funny. It was pretty scary to me. We're supposed to be doing anonymous to each other. It's kind of what I was thinking, And I didn't realize that the we is the fact that we do this together. We do life together. That's what the we in the first step means, is that we're going to do this together. I got you, you got me, we'll get through this together because there's no way any one of us can do this by ourselves. And then my wife moved while I was in jail. Luckily, she did give me a key to the new house, and, we were living next to some railroad tracks, and I don't know if you guys that don't know me, I'm a little bit high strung, okay? Yeah, thanks, Dick. Just a little. I'm a 7-day watch that could run for about 10, 12 days. If you guys get that, I am tight. I am wound pretty tight. And we had left, and my wife and I had left to go someplace, and we were running behind, maybe a minute, something like that. But the train was blocking the road at our new house. And I mean to tell you, being late is something that absolutely sends me through the roof. And I'm getting so wound up, and I just start screaming F-bombs at the top of my lungs. I can't handle it. I'm shaking in the car because I'm going to be late. And my wife yells at me to just go home. She didn't want to be in the car with me anymore. I put the car in reverse and matted the gas. And when I'm doing about 35 miles per hour, just about as fast as that car could go in reverse, I turned the wheel. And with the car about halfway around, I dropped it in drive and kept right on going. Never lifted off the gas. She opened the door and tried to get out. That's the internal, that's who I am deep down without AA. I'm the kind of person that my wife wants to get out of the car at 35, 40 miles per hour. I don't want to be that person anymore. I can still be, as we found out today. I'm still wound tight. We had a little bit of an argument earlier today, and I scare her when I get that angry. So I made an inventory. I was on the phone with my sponsor, and we'd started talking about this stuff. I didn't like who I was, and I just started blurting this stuff out to him. And he'd say, put that down. Write that down. And I couldn't write it down. I couldn't put it on paper. And finally he said to me, just after the meeting on Saturday, go home, call me when you get home. I said, okay. I got home, I called him up, and I said, now what? He said, write the word resentment on the top of the paper. Anybody you're pissed off at, anybody you could get back at, wouldn't get caught. Doesn't matter if they're people or not, if they're institution, if they're, just generally the way things are done in this world. Write it down. Just leave about 3 lines between them. I just started writing down and name a list, and I'm thinking I'm going to have like 3 or 4 people. I ended up with 26 names, including, the federal government was on it, ex-girlfriends, my parents, my wife, my brother, my kids. The night of my last drunk, our youngest is the one who called the police. She got scared because I picked her mother up and threw her across the room. The one thing that I said I'd never do was what landed me in jail and in AA. And that was when I got violent with my wife. The one thing I said I would never do. And I did. That was a low I didn't think I could ever get any lower than. And honestly, if it wasn't for AA, I could have lowered that bar even farther. I totally believe that. Started writing the list, made the list of the people I was pissed off at. And then my sponsor said, okay, why are you mad at them? Write that next to it. And I called him after every section of this. And we did this 4th step by phone. And it was about 15 minutes in between phone calls. Because it really doesn't take long once you start writing it. I think I spent less than an hour and a half actually writing down the 4th step. The thing when we got all done with it, I had the 3 columns laid out just like the big book shows it. And then my sponsor goes to me, all right, now next to every one of those why you're pissed and how it affects you, write down your part in it. I'm like, wait a minute, I don't see this over here. This isn't on this chart in the big book. He goes, turn, and I don't even, and I'm horrible about what pages it is on in the big book, but there's a section where it says, referring to our list again, we looked at our part in these resentments. And I had never wanted to do that. I didn't have any, and most of the time I didn't think I had any part in that. You know, and there was a few of them that I didn't write anything next to because I told my sponsor, I don't know. I don't know what my part was in that. And he said, that's okay, we'll figure that out. You know, if there is or if there isn't. Because honestly, some of us are hurt without provocation. You know, but as it says in the third step, you know, sometimes we've stepped on toes, they retaliate seemingly without provocation. You know, that was me. You know, I tend to go through life like a bull in a china shop. You know, and I still do. You know, I said earlier I was pretty wound tight. Still am. I really am wound up tight. There's a lot going on in my life, and I don't like it. I don't like things that mess up my rhythm in life. Any little thing that sets me off from that really gets me going. So this gets me to the fifth step, and that's when Jim came into my life. My sponsor said he was gonna be going away at times and stuff like that, and I needed to get another sponsor as well. And he told me that Jim was going to be my other sponsor. So I said, okay, Jim, I guess you're my other sponsor. So I had two guys sit with me on my fifth step. We did it after work one day across from my place of work, and we just sat in the park bench and just went through the stuff. It was uneventful. You know, I didn't get any big relief or anything like that. I just was doing what I was supposed to do at this point. There's been talk in my life about whether there's compliance or not. You know, whether I'm doing this stuff because I want to do it or doing it because I'm supposed to do it. You know, sometimes it's both. It goes back and forth. There's times where I don't want to deal with you people. I don't like people. You know, I'll love every one of you one-on-one, but in a group, I don't like you. So, just the way it is, sorry. Anyway, so Jim and I and Butch were talking through this stuff, and they told me to go home and spend a half an hour and review the first 5 proposals. And I looked at him and said, what the fuck are these proposals you're talking about now? We've been talking about steps, now you're going to talk about proposals. You know, what are you guys doing to me? You're driving me nuts with these things. And he goes, it's the same thing. And I'm like, okay, fine. Went home and went to my daughter's basketball game. Didn't do what I was told. I know, shocker, right? Went to my daughter's basketball game, and because, of course, when we're doing the fifth step, that's all I could think about was getting it done so I could get to my daughter's game. You know, that's another one of my defects is keeping my head and my butt in the same room. It's very difficult for me. I'm assuming probably most people it is. So got through with that fifth step. I went to my daughter's game. Things just didn't really change. I'm still going through life. I'm high strung. I'm just right on the edge of explosion all the time. And our daughter came up to me with some news. I'm not going to share what it is right now, but it was not very good news. And I was ready to explode again. At this point, the railroad had come in and forced us out of our house. So our family of 4 is living at my mom and dad's, which isn't great. You know, being an adult, having to live in your parents' house is hard. But when you're still harboring huge resentments at those people, it makes it even more difficult. You know, I still blamed my parents for almost all of my drinking at that point. So I was shaking. I was so angry. And I couldn't handle it anymore. And I went to our property where we were moving our house to, and I sat in the back of my pickup truck, looked up the stars, and I said the 7-step prayer. I had thought about it, everything that they had pointed out to me as character defects. I'm a control freak. I'm egotistical. I have, egotistical, childish, and grandiose. And I'd hit every one of them. They'd pointed those things out to me, using sometimes different words, so it was a little nicer. I think one of the ways they put it, you think about yourself a lot. And that's just a nice way to say you're an egomaniac, And I didn't want that anymore. I didn't want to be that guy anymore. And so I said the 7-step prayer. And that was done. So I called my sponsor the next day, told them what was going on, of course, with our daughter, and then told them what I did. And that was something different. I'd done something different instead of doing the same old thing that I've always done. I didn't get violent. I didn't hit anybody. I didn't throw anything. I didn't break anything. I removed myself from the situation to where I could get with just me and God. And that is something totally foreign to me. That's not my natural default. My natural default is to break stuff, scare people, intimidate the world. That's my MO. So Butch said, okay, let's do the 8th step. He goes, let's talk, bring that 4th step. We'll get the 8th step out of that. And he took the 8th step, the resentments list, and he folded it. So all I could see was the names and what my part was in it. And that was pretty slick. I've used this with every one of my sponsees since. And what he was saying, he goes, that takes the rest of it and puts it away. None of that stuff is there anymore. You're forgiving them. You're done with it. You've forgiven them for their part of it. It's gone. And so it laid it right out for me. And then they went through and they talked about who I was going to make an amends to. Jim was the one that made me write down how each amend was going to look. Just write down 2 or 3 sentences, what I wanted to do, how it was going to look. And they looked them over, checked them out, see if that was good before I made any amends. I think at this point, Jim had turned into my primary sponsor at this point, because I think Butch had moved away. So we were talking every day on the phone about this stuff. At that point in time, he told me to not worry about my dad, because my dad was still at a point in his life where, as he put it, may use it as ammunition against me. And you don't need to walk into that right now, which I'm grateful for, because I probably would have. So I did what I was told to do with the 9th step. The one that was the hardest to do was with Doris. I tried for years. Most of the time it was, I don't want to hear your bullshit. You've got nothing to offer right now. I don't want to hear it. And, okay. And I think it was 10 years sober before she would listen. I said what I was told to say. And at the end of that was, is there anything you'd like to say? And I sat there and listened as she unloaded the baggage that she had been carrying from the crap I had done to her. Probably the hardest thing I've ever had to listen to was have somebody tell you how much of a piece of shit you treated them like. But it was all true. So I did it. I owned it. I try not to be that guy anymore. But as we know, I'm not perfect. It does say in here, we are not saints. That's good, because I'm not a saint. Far from it. So, that was my 9th step. It took a while to get through that. In the meantime, the guys had me doing 10, 11, and 12. I hadn't seen Butch for a while at this point. He had moved up north into the woods someplace, and he didn't have a phone and a way to get a hold of him or anything like that. So I'd been talking to Jim and another guy every day. And I was getting angry again. I'd been doing the 10-step. Guys had told me how to, eat crow while it's warm, all that crap, and it didn't really, it wasn't helping. I was still getting angry, violently angry. And I walked out of the shop, and I worked right next door to a party store. And I walked out, and I started heading to the party store. I was pissed. I'm like, if this is what it's like being sober, fuck it. I'm going to grab a bottle of tequila. I'm going to light this town on fire. And I wasn't being, this was serious. This wasn't some metaphor or anything like that. I was ready to burn everything down to the ground. I'd had enough. And on the way, I thank God for the invention of cell phones. Because I called Jim on my way. He said, no, you really don't want to drink. You wouldn't have called me if you wanted to drink. If you really want to drink, you're not going to call your sponsor. I learned that. Okay? But I called him because I was told that it would have gotten to be such a habit of calling him every day. It got to be such a habit of when I was pissed off to call him. I don't do emotions well. Any of them. Any emotion I do not do well. And I called him on the way, and he said, well, first off, don't buy the bottle of tequila. Okay, don't do that. He goes, well, why don't you go over to the club to the meeting? Go grab a meeting over there. It's like, all right. I went over to the East Club, because it's right by where I work, and Butch walked in the door. Or Butch was walking out as I was walking in, and he goes, you don't look good. Let's talk. And we started talking about some stuff, and I realized I had never done the 11th step. I'd stopped doing the steps after I'd done the amends, and I wasn't growing at all. And at that point, it was, I talked to him. He said, you need to talk to these guys you're seeing every day in your life. Okay? And I don't remember who it was, but it was my first real group conscience that I was the center of. It ended up being after a Saturday morning meeting. And Jim was there. Lyle was there. No, not Lyle. Larry was there. And I can't remember who else was there, but there was 2 other guys from that Saturday morning meeting. It might have been one of you guys. I don't know. But we started talking about the 11th step. And it's talking about the seeking to grow. The 11th step is probably my favorite step out of all of them. I've read the 11th step prayer probably 300-400 times, if not more. I read it every day now. It is so loaded with everything that I'm supposed to be doing. And for somebody like me, I've always been the guy that you need to understand why I'm doing this. You need to understand why I drank the way I did. You need to understand why I'm so angry. You need to understand why of this. And the 11th step prayer says, no, I need to seek to understand you before you understand me. And that's the part of the 11th step prayer that is so hard and so important in my life, is to seek to understand and to be understood. So that, that's the 11th step for me, is wrapped up in that prayer. There's more, but that's the basics of it, So that gets us to the 12th step. If that's not a spiritual awakening, I don't know what is. When I want to burn the town of Lansing down, to be able to stop and call my sponsor on the way from doing that, that's got to be a spiritual awakening. And it was for me. And that was really one of many, but that was one of my bigger ones. Okay? And that's a result of these steps. It is a result of the fact that knowledge of the fact that when I react to things, I react poorly. That I'm going violent. I'm going to try and intimidate everybody. Okay? So, there's a result of these steps, and then we tried to carry this message to alcoholics. I'm trying. That's what I'm here tonight for. I have guys that call me. I have guys that I call. They're not always sponsors and sponsees. I've learned that it's a trusted friends that you go to. There's been times in my life where, Tom, you were my first call multiple times during the day. Mark, I've called you times when it's just, when I don't know what to do, because you're trusted friends. The hardest part of this thing, though, is to practice these principles in all our affairs. I've surrounded myself with guys that are married in AA. And we all say the hardest place to practice this is at home, but it is also the most essential. I'm probably going to slaughter the quote, but if you're not practicing this at home, you really don't have a program to practice. And I try. I really do try. I fall short, miserably short often, but I do try. So, and so the end of the message, what it's like now, I can't imagine life without you all, okay? The majority of my friends are all in AA. I could call any one of the guys in this room or gals in this room that I know and say, hey, I'm really screwed up right now. I need help. Every one of those people would be on right away. They'd know what to do. They'd help me. And if they didn't have an answer, they'd send me to somebody who did. That's one of the things that I learned from my first sponsors was they told me, we're not going to have all the answers for you. We're just not. We're not perfect, but what we will do is we'll find somebody that can help you. And my sponsors have never let me down with that. I don't expect my sponsors to know the answers for everything. I don't know the answers when my sponsees call me. I spend more time, I think, referring my sponsees to other people, which is fine, because then if there's something that they're going through, I'm with them as they're talking to these other people, and I'm learning too. So, I've got a good life, and I couldn't do it without you. So that's all I got. Thanks.